start with the building construction rather than with the consulting engineering. And the building construction is, of course, what we're doing. We are constructing, and so there needs to be a business case for this. And that would be on the owner side of things. So you may be an owner representative for various kinds of companies that need to build the buildings, maybe for growth for their company, or maybe because some of their buildings are becoming outdated and they need to be renovated, or maybe it's a public institution that's growing, or university. So there's got to be a case for construction. And the way that those user groups, that they have user groups, so experts. So I gave the example last night of healthcare, so doctors or otherwise, that'd be sensible, right? You work with the people who need the spaces to come up with the need for a building, and in doing that, they have to understand funding sources. So they might, a business might seek out a grant. So there's legislation that happens at the federal government that then allocates opportunities for funding, just depending on what they're trying to achieve, maybe for energy savings. And so companies can go seek those out to pay for part or some of their, maybe all of the case for building the building they need to build. With that comes stipulations. So Buy America is one that's commonly used, that then causes the design team to make sure, and that's the word, I guess, to make sure, because the funding sources always come with, the criteria, and also the receipts, or the way that you can prove that you did follow the reason that they said that you could spend the money. So the process ends up being that once somebody within an organization is going to build a building, and they've inevitably found all the stakeholders and decided that they're going to move forward, that they need to find an architect or engineer. And one of those two will be the primary contract holder. If it's very science or otherwise based, the shapes of the room and sizes based on what's go in there, maybe an engineer would be the prime contract holder, and then they would get an architect. Or maybe there'll be multiple prime contract holders. It really depends on what's being trying to be accomplished and which way. So a request for proposal would be put out, looking for that architect or engineer, presumably, and versus just knowing one. That's possible. But it could be a request for a bid, a request for qualification. If it was just a request for proposal, then they would be saying, we think we need to build this, we want to build this, and we need somebody to help us figure out how to build this, would be potentially an example. But from these various mechanisms for them to solicit for help, for professional help, then they form a contract, and that contract is typically a lump sum, or time and material could be as well. So the delivery, so a time and material be for a smaller size project might be a lower dollar size project versus a very large newer construction project might just be based on the percentage or assumed percentage on what it will cost. This tends to be the industry standard of expectations that can make design consulting fees kind of expensive, but on the other end of it, there's liability insurance, and then long term, they're to be the engineer or architects of record. So that's also a weight to bear. So to deliver the project, once you do have potentially either an architect or an engineer, or maybe in the bid climate today, it's nice to have, because the lead times get long, so for the equipment, and the costs vary, and the market materials vary. So as you're working with the architect or engineer, if the owner is very has lots of ideas and wants to consider, and then also, they just want the best they might, at least in this environment right now, or most recent years, find a integrated type delivery method where they might have a construction manager who's at risk or not at risk, who can bid or not bid the project. But the benefits that come from this is you have probably vetted contractors. Those CMs normally don't even let subcontractors bid on work until they know that they have gone through their criteria. So it's a little bit, there's lots of aspects to it that I probably couldn't cover accurately in the setting, I guess. So the procurement is the activity of taking the drawings and the specifications and actually getting the stuff built. So there's these ways to get that done. And with that comes usually gaps in design. So if maybe the contractor is going to do part of the design, maybe the branch panel board schedules, because that might make it might be sensible for them to do that. But then there just tends to be what ordinarily would have been a design bid build approach, and everybody understood their roles and expectations. There might be just miscommunication, and so responsibility matrices really help with that, to say who's going to deliver what and who's responsible for which, and the similar. So the consultants then assemble deliverables, the contract documents, and to do that they have to go through phases of construction. The phases of the design. So a usual could be a conceptual plan, a schematic design, a design, I like to say design deliverable, but it's not design deliverable, it's design, so design progress, and then construction documents to then be estimated by contractors and bid. It doesn't mean that they will be exactly in that order for every project. A small project might just go straight to construction documents, and there'll be phases or percentages along the way as well for reviews. If they're potentially for a municipality of some sort, they could be going through specific reviews and specific requirements, and architects are terrific in those aspects of helping us navigate, and they understand contracts. Typically they handle them more frequently than engineers. Doesn't mean engineers do not understand them, but so getting through those hurdles can be a thing. So construction administration being the aspect of the building is getting built, but before it can be built, there's a lot of paperwork, which is in the form of submittals. So the contractors are looking at what's said to be necessary for the project and working with vendors to find agreeable or products or solutions to install, and possibly submitting them if that's what the construction administration process and the front end of the specification says to do. In the division 00 or 01, there's a explanation of how this is going to go. Maybe even there could be no submittals. Maybe it is, the requirement is it's on the drawings, and if that's what it is and it's on the drawings and specs, it doesn't mean that this is exactly the right way, but there's lots of different ways and reasons to execute projects. So could be that. As built and record drawings, so the contractors likely have requirements through standard specifications. The most common specifications issued would be then having them do this as a standard of care as well, to be marking plans along the way as they're installing, and then at the end, if it is in the contract to do so, or otherwise just it usually is a standard of care, especially if you're in that lump sum situation, to provide record drawings, which means the engineer receives those markings, paper markings from the contractor, and updates them in electronic software. So along the way, if there are misses or miscoordinations or changes, there's reasons for contractors potentially to request more money. And there's a bunch of reasons why there could be, certainly something could have been put in there wrong, or designed wrong, or But one way or another, somebody does have to pay for it. So it could be the owner, but as the design professionals, we just have to be really, it's not, it feels the liability isn't just that if we miss it on the drawings that the owner would have to pay for it regardless anyways. It's potentially ends up on your insurance as a scar that when next time you go to submit for a project, they see that too, and that would be excellent for finding future work. The installation isn't just install, there's acceptance testing for a new installation, voltage levels for testing of cables, and would be one example as a difference to maintenance testing. Startup, so maybe that involves the manufacturer's representative if the specifications were written or edited to say that. Maybe it's just a contractor. Maybe it's not big enough to have a startup activity. There's training involved, commissioning. So the commissioning being after you said, okay, it's done, then going in there and making sure it's performing functionally. And then, I mean, just even from the basic installations, it's a checking of the installation and of the product, because that's what buildings are. They're very big, expensive products. And then seasonally should be coming back. If you're testing in the winter versus the summer, there's 6 months come back. And then of course, these are all things that need to be specifically in agreements, but I'm just stating the general of what is for much of the industry in delivering a building construction project. So we said that it's a building life cycle, it's a big product, and it has a life cycle. So in the responsibility of designing for our clients, what we choose that we have technical expertise and they may or may not have, or how we care for the documents to make sure is not a great word, to look or help the contractor target what we really want them to install and not skate by. All of these things could result in a building that you have hindsight about or regret, and maybe it's not a very efficient building, or I mean, even just something as simple, not electrical, right? Just not considering that you'll be driving snowplows through an area, and for whatever, architecturally or civilly, they weren't considering these aspects. But for electrically, even a fire alarm system, having one, which many buildings do, that necessitates maybe qualified individuals. Medium voltage would be another situation. And then even just the products that we're putting or deciding that are happening in these buildings, or deciding need to happen in these buildings, or even indirectly being forced to do because of building codes for life safety reasons, might have specific product to maintain the listing, technically maintenance and upkeep for all of the products and systems that are installed in the buildings. So the facility staff of the building owner, they may be facility staff, or they may be calling a third party, electrician or otherwise, that doesn't normally show up. They just show up when they're needed. So it's the difference of care. And so as we're designing, that's another consideration about what might be. So like in an industrial installation, there's different level of care, or otherwise there's different allowances in the code, for instance, where disconnects can be for motors, we were saying, that are hazardous and rotating. And then yes, qualification of operators kind of goes into that. Before I say on that, I opened yesterday and I kind of skipped right past it here. If you haven't heard the term before, I imagine you might have, some of you, perfect project. It just means that it didn't have to go to construction, or maybe for whatever reason, it never got built. So it's perfect because nobody said there was anything wrong with it. They're exciting, but just they're not a great motivation for making better projects or even winning more work. So I like perfect projects. They're great for learning, but throughout you might hear me mention perfect projects, and it's a miss. Those are misses. Okay, any questions about what we talked about on the building construction before I move to the consulting engineering?